Hi guys, welcome back to a Game Week 14 team selection video. In this video, we'll be talking about how Game Week 13 went, how my team did, especially with the likes of Kane's game getting postponed and obviously Foden not even appearing for City. How I'm going to look for my transfer plans for Game Week 14, and how we are going to look in terms of like future game weeks and really like nailing down optimal moves before they become template. So, without further ado, let's get into my Game Week 13 review. So, as you can see on screen, I ended up 58 points all out in Game Week 13. It gave me a 1k red arrow, which is not the end of the world. I was hoping for a green arrow once we had that Liverpool game and Jota hauled and Salah did well and Trent hauled, but unfortunately, as I said, with the likes of Foden and Kane both not appearing, I ended up having Livramento and Ben White off the bench. So Livramento so many times on my bench with masses of points, but this time 0 points. Obviously, playing against Liverpool, I didn't expect much from him. And Ben White, I made the decision to bench him, fully anticipating that Foden wouldn't play. But I played Foden over him just in case Foden did play. But of course, that didn't happen. So, not the best game week in general. As I was saying, Liverpool did really well, like really happy with Jota, really happy with Trent. Salah again, almost like just beyond the realms of possibility how he's returned in every single game week except one. It's just incredible stats. Tony finally back-to-back returns. That's looking pretty decent. I know it was a penalty, but still, just in terms of confidence bringing goals, there's a chance. And Waymo had another chance to score. Unfortunately, it looks like I'm going to have to hold him again. Whether I bench him or not this week is up for debate, but I think I'll be keeping him. Gallagher had one chance. I think he had a decent assist chance. I can't remember who had the shot, but he could have had an assist. And then there was one chance where Zaha shot and he could have squared it to Gallagher. And obviously not ideal. In terms of Gaeta, Joachim Andersen is out injured with a hamstring injury, as I'll get onto in the Game Week 14 doubts are out. Unfortunately, that sort of worsens the Palace defence in general. However, Palace's numbers, they're the third best defence in the league in terms of expected goals, only behind City and Chelsea. So if you do have Gaeta, I do think he will come good. Like, they've got a very good defence. Vieira looks like a solid manager. They're just going to have to get working a little bit on defending set pieces and how they're going to play out from the back without Anderson and with Tompkins. So I think if you've got Gaeta, I wouldn't panic. I wouldn't panic sell him for Ramsdale or back to Sanchez or however you've done it. I think with the fixture run and the team in general, it's a perfectly good hold. And then just looking around the rest of the team, obviously White, very solid performance from Arsenal. They didn't really look like conceding, to be honest, apart from that Shelvey long range effort. And then on another day, Rudiger could have really ended up with a lot of points, as I was saying. So in general, I'm perfectly happy with this week. Basically a grey arrow, nothing really too special, but nothing awful, especially with, £20 million sat on my bench because two players didn't play. I'll absolutely take that. So let's get into the Game Week 14 doubt or out and see who's going to be missing and how that's going to affect our players. So here's a mix of players that were injured this weekend or have injuries that prevented them from playing this weekend. We'll start with Joachim Andersen. As I was saying, he missed this weekend. He's got a hamstring injury. He's 25% chance of playing. I imagine it will be James Tompkins again playing for Palace against Leeds. It's not the best. It's obviously not the best, but I think that Palace will still be okay. I don't think, as I was saying, if you have Gaeta, I wouldn't worry too much. In terms of West Ham, Cresswell had a nasty collision with the post. I'm sure he'll be fine. Eventually, I don't know. Not a lot of managers have West Ham defence at the moment. But if you are considering it from Game Week 16, I think that's still a very good option. whether you go for the Cresswell, who's obviously a bit more expensive, or whether you go for Soufal or even Johnson if he's available come that week, he's still starting a lot. And for his price and West Ham's fixtures, he could be a really good differential. But we'll just have to see what happens when it comes to that. Brighton at home this week. I don't expect Brighton to cause West Ham too many problems. So, yeah, in terms of the West Ham defence, I'm sure they're fine for this week. Saka went off with a knock as well, just after scoring his goal. I don't know about him. I don't imagine that it will be too serious, but it might be a case of just missed the midweek game, so he's back for next weekend. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I have to listen to what Arteta says. Foden's the big one, and I'll get onto him in a minute. But we'll start with Grealish. Grealish still expected to be out. KDB, I'm not sure if he's going to be back. I think he's going to be back for the weekend because obviously it was just COVID. So I'm sure, like, if he's feeling fine, etc., he should be back. But Grealish, obviously, the one with the knock, so he's going to be out. I think Pep said, like, in terms of the timescale, Grealish will be out the longest. Then it will be KDB and Foden, sort of as a level playing field. So I'll get on to Foden later. In terms of Firmino, which obviously has a knock-on effect to Diogo Jota, we've heard nothing really since Klopp said pre-deadline last weekend, like not even this weekend, last weekend, he was saying that Firmino is looking like he's going to be back soon. Well, we haven't heard anything along that line. So I think it was more just like sort of downplaying the rumours that he was going to be out for a while, sort of like people were saying that he would be out till mid-December. I don't think it will be that late, but I think we're still okay with Jota for both games this week. In terms of Tarkowski, he is suspended, so if you have Raul Jimenez or Huang Li Chan, I see a lot of people like frustrated with them because they weren't brilliant against Norwich. But I think you've still got to keep them because Burnley just, without Tarkowski, you don't know exactly how they're going to play. I think their backup centre back is Long, is it? I don't know, to be honest. I think it's Kevin Long, and he's very average. So, I mean, if you've got Huang or Jimenez, it's a must keep for me for this week, and then see if you can sell next week. And obviously Foster was out with a groin injury. I think he still will be number one when he comes back, unless Bachmann does really well. But conceding 4 goals, sorry, I don't know what that was. Conceding 4 goals in one game isn't ideal in terms of like getting your stock to rise. So yeah, I assume that Foster will come back when he is fit. Their upcoming games are not very good. I think it's Chelsea at home and then City at home. So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about playing Foster at the moment, even if you have him. So yeah, definitely wait until their fixtures turn, and then maybe consider playing him over your current keeper. But at the moment, obviously, just leave him on your bench. It's not worth a transfer for a backup keeper. So yeah, keep it the same. In terms of my transfer targets, I've been looking ahead for like the Christmas schedule and seeing sort of potential areas of rotation or people, as I've said, with Foden and other players being injured. I think I'd like to beef up my squad because at the moment I have. So last week I did the transfer from Brownhill to Gallagher to give me one more playing player that was like a decent option. And I had the money to do that, and that was good. So this week, I think I'm going to do the same, but with my striker. So at the moment, I've got Keenan Davis from Villa, just like literally bench fodder, 4.4 million. So I think I'm going to go from him up to one of these chaps on screen, either Emmanuel Dennis or Josh King. And I'll get onto them in a second, but I just want to quickly note that I think I've seen a lot of debate over whether you should have a full squad of playing players or however many playing players you need on the bench. In terms of the way I've got it at the moment, I've got 3 like expensive defenders, one from City, one from Chelsea, and one from Liverpool. And then I've got only 1 midfield premium and 1 striker premium in my team at the moment. So I've got Salah and I've got Kane. And then I've got like 2 mid-price players across like Foden and Jota. So at the moment, I have more than enough money to be able to afford like 2 cheap midfielders in Mbeumo and Gallagher, and two cheap strikers in Tony and one of the guys on screen. And just in terms of like the upcoming games, if say Jota misses out a game when Firmino gets back in 3 weeks' time, or if 3 game weeks' time, that is, or if say Foden's out for another game, or if there's sudden rotation and Rudiger doesn't play against Watford because Watford are not as good and they want to give him a rest or something along those lines, or Cancelo finally gets benched because he's played 13 out of 13 games, it just means that you have that extra player on the bench that can come on. Obviously, last week we had a massive that just never happens in terms of like a game being called off for weather. But what if it does happen again? I know it's sort of like playing devil's advocate here because it's not going to happen every week. But what if it does happen? Like if it were going to happen, like the Christmas period where the weather is really notoriously poor, it could be now. So in terms of that, that's why I'm going to be beefing up my bench. If you guys are on like a more premiums, or you want more, if you want an extra high price defender, then it probably isn't for you. But for me, I think I'm going to have a full 15 player squad at the moment. So let's get into Dennis versus King and decide which one of these guys I'm going to bring into my team. So as you can see on screen, I've got their returns, I've got their XG and their XA, so expected goals and expected assists, and I've also got their overperformance / underperformance stat, because that's been something I've been looking at recently. Not just looking at their expected goals and expected assists, but also looking at why it's the same. So in terms of the fixtures, let's start with that. These two, I will hasten to add, should not be playing the next 2 weeks. That's not my prerogative at all. Like I'd be happy to bench them versus Chelsea and City, and then use them off the bench versus Brentford, Burnley, and Palace. Like that's the plan for me at the moment. But obviously, if we do have like another cancellation and a bigger game gets called off, or say Foden and Cancelo, or like I was saying, Rudiger gets rotated, then it also means I do actually have someone who's going to play off the bench and not Keenan Davis, who's just going to get me a 0-pointer. So in terms of that, that's why I've gone with these boys. In terms of who I'd actually like to go with, as you can see on screen, Dennis is... sorry, I actually haven't put the prices on. Dennis is cheaper than King. I believe he's 0.3 million cheaper before King is supposed to rise this evening, potentially. So in terms of price, Dennis is the better option. In terms of nailedness, I think they're just as nailed as each other. Dennis has gone off a couple of times early in the past because... for whatever reason. I think he picked up a tiny knock yesterday, but I think he will be okay to play midweek. The only thing is that with Sarr missing those 2 penalties and Sarr being out with a knee injury, King will be on penalties. So I don't know if King will be on penalties when Sarr is back. That's not something we're aware of, but he's done no harm for his cause by slotting away the 1 penalty that he's had so far. So I'm sure that if that continues, then he'll carry on. And then also in terms of expected data, the plus means that you're overperforming and the minus means that you're underperforming. So if you look at the stats, Dennis is massively overperforming in both goals and assists this season. And then if you look at King, he's underperforming on goals. So he's had 5 goals already and he's underperforming. So that's pretty insane. And then he's obviously had slightly more assists, but obviously a lot of that is passing to Dennis, and Dennis is overperforming on goals. So it sort of evens itself out there. You can understand why King's overperforming on assists because Dennis is overperforming on scoring goals, if that makes sense. So in terms of the guy that I'm going to go with, I think I'm going to go with King. I think he's the better option in my opinion. If you can't get to King, I wouldn't worry about going Dennis. I've seen rumours that Dennis is in contention to go to AFCON, but he hasn't played for, I think it's Nigeria, in like recent international breaks, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. Obviously he's on good form, but I think there was maybe like a falling out with the international manager or some sort. He just hasn't been on the international scene recently. So if you got the money for King, I'd go for King. If not, I'd go for Dennis, and I'd be happy with either, to be honest. Now let's get into what we're going to do with Foden. I think if you haven't got Jota, that's an easy switch. But obviously, if like me, you do have Jota, then it makes it slightly trickier. It depends on your bench, in my opinion. I have like a decent bench, so I will. I'm saying now I'm going to hold Foden. I'm using my transfer on either King or Dennis, probably King, as I was saying. But I think that this upcoming run for Foden, even if he misses Villa, which I'm not sure if he will, but even if he does, you've got Watford, Wolves, Leeds, and Newcastle in the next 4 games. Like in terms of like City versus those teams, it's just going to be like incredible the attacking potential of someone like Foden against this team, against this caliber of team. So I don't even think that like missing out Villa is nailed. I don't think that's exactly going to happen. But if he does miss out against Villa, it's not the end of the world because I've got like Livramento off the bench or something, or even like King or White if someone else doesn't play. So in terms of that, I'm pretty happy with holding Foden. If you can't hold Foden and you've already got Jota, I think that the best option if you want to go back if you want to stay within the City team, I think the better option is Gundogan. If you wanted to go for him, I'd pick him over Bernardo Silva. If you wanted to go outside of City, if you want to go for like a massive punt or differential, I don't think Cornet's terrible. I don't think Madison's terrible. Like Madison obviously had a really good game this week, but the thing with Madison is that he's one of those guys that just has a massive purple patch. I mean, for the rest of the season, he could be awful, but I mean, sometimes I just remember him just going on like wild streaks of hot form and just being like unplayable. I don't know if that's going to happen this time, but their fixtures aren't terrible for the next 3 or 4. I think they play like Southampton and Newcastle as 2 of their next 3 or 4. So if you want to take a punt on Madison, obviously if you could hold Foden or maybe for a tiny bit longer, or you've got a bench option, I think maybe like Jared Bowen eventually. I know he missed out yesterday, so it's not like the most obvious move. But I think West Ham midfielders and attackers in general, if you don't have Antonio, will be good options to come by again soon. In terms of my transfer this week, I am going to do Keenan Davis to Josh King. I think that's just beefs up my bench, like I was saying, gives me an extra option for the next few weeks until probably like game week 18, 19, I think it is, when like I'll have to make a decision. At the moment, I'm pretty happy with like this strung out squad with a lot of players because there are so few premium options. I think even when I look to get rid of Kane, I don't even know if I'll go Kane to Ronaldo like I originally planned. I'm liking the option of going Kane to Antonio and then upgrading Tony and Dennis, or sorry, Tony and King in this scenario, up to Watkins in game week 17 and Calvert-Lewin if he looks very good. He has a really good run of fixtures. If Calvert-Lewin comes back in any sort of form, he could be the one to go for. If not, I'll just keep King and obviously go for a midfielder option, someone like Bowen or something you could easily get in for like 1.5 million less. So plenty of cash to go around in terms of my team at the moment. In terms of captaincy for this week, I say there's a debate. There's not really a debate. I'm going for Salah, but just something to note is that Jota's expected goals are actually looking better than Salah's now. So that is an interesting one. Obviously, more points for goals than assists. So in terms of how the options weigh out, Jota does look better. But just in case, like a penalty or just Salah in terms of like nailedness for minutes, I just think that if the game's tight or anything, Jota will go off probably for like Origi or Minamino, and Salah's just not going to come off unless it's injury related. So for me, it will be Salah again this week, and my team will line up like this. Gaeta in goal versus Leeds with Gallagher in midfield. The two City boys, Cancelo and Foden versus Villa. Obviously, if Foden doesn't play, I've got Livramento off the bench versus Leicester at home. Not a terrible fixture for him. He could easily get an attacking return. Leicester have not looked great defensively. Then I've got the Liverpool triple up with Salah as captain. I've got Rudiger versus Watford. I don't know. I just have a feeling Rudiger might be benched this week. Don't know, to be perfectly honest, but let's have a look. And then obviously I've got the Brentford boys versus Spurs and Kane versus Brentford. So decent side, I think. It's not the best on paper, like a lot of away games and a lot of teams playing against like teams that aren't the most optimal team to play against in terms of like there's no one playing like a Newcastle or a Norwich or something this week. But in terms of the week, I'm pretty happy for it. And as I was saying, it sets me up for the next few weeks. So let me know what your guys' teams are. Let me know if you're considering any transfers. Obviously, at me on Twitter or comment in the comments section. Please like the video if you enjoyed and subscribe if you're new and want to get regular notifications. Thank you very much for watching and good luck for Game Week 14.